In 1911, inside America's grandest ballrooms, a new rhythm had taken over the nation. Thousands of Americans moved to its rhythm. They danced to it, they celebrated it, they called it modern. But behind the movement was a story America did not always want to see. The sound filling America's ballrooms had roots in communities that lived far from those elegant halls. In the towns of the American Midwest, a new musical language was emerging. A language built from experience, creativity, and generations of African American musical traditions. Ragtime was not simply a trend. It was a new way of organizing rhythm, melody, and movement. A sound created in one community traveled across the country and entered the homes of millions. But the people who created this music lived in a country still divided by race, class, and unequal opportunity. Ragtime crossed boundaries that society itself had not yet crossed. Because sometimes, the most powerful changes begin with a rhythm people cannot ignore. At the end of the 19th century, America was transforming faster than ever before. Railroads connected cities, new industries created new communities, and new sounds began traveling with them. For African American communities, the decades after slavery were a time of rebuilding, adaptation, and cultural creation. Music became one of the places where memory, identity, and imagination could survive. In homes, churches, and social gatherings, musicians developed new ways of using rhythm and melody. The defining feature of ragtime was its restless rhythm, a musical tension between steady movement and unexpected accents. Like the railroads crossing America, ragtime began moving beyond its original communities. Cities like St. Louis became important centers where musicians, performers, and audiences came together. Printed music allowed a song created in one place to reach thousands of homes. For the first time, popular music could spread on a national scale.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. How is your
A
family
sound
doing today?
created within African American communities was entering spaces that had often excluded its creators.
Securing this land now ensures our children have a future.
Behind
The
every
bank
popular
terms are
sound
steep,
were
but the
people whose
ownership is
stories
worth
were
it. It
often
surely
less
is.
visible than the
We stand
music
together on
itself.
this.
This was an America where creativity could travel freely, even when people themselves could not. Ragtime carried the complexity of the world that created it. It reflected African American musical traditions, American popular entertainment, and the changing sounds of a modern nation. It was not created in isolation. It grew from communities constantly adapting and creating. The musicians who shaped ragtime were not simply providing entertainment. They were building a new cultural language. And soon, that language would move far beyond the communities that created it. The rhythm was leaving the margins and approaching the center of American life. But the journey from the margins to the mainstream would reveal a deeper contradiction. Because behind this revolution was a composer whose story was as complicated as the music itself.
This section here looks quite challenging to play.
Perhaps, but the melody is simply delightful.
Behind the sound that transformed American popular culture was a musician who spent his life searching for recognition. Born after the Civil War, Joplin grew up in a generation of African Americans building new lives in a changing country. Music became not only a profession, but a path toward education, expression, and possibility. For young musicians of the era, talent could open doors. But those doors were rarely equally open to everyone. Joplin studied the traditions around him and developed a style that transformed familiar sounds into something entirely new. Ragtime demanded precision. Beneath its joyful surface was remarkable musical complexity. In cities like St. Louis, musicians found audiences ready for new sounds. Here, ragtime moved from private creativity into public experience. Then came the moment that changed everything. Ragtime became something people could buy, share, and play at home. One composition in particular would make Joplin's name known across the country. The success of Maple Leaf Rag demonstrated that ragtime was not a passing curiosity. But popularity did not erase the inequalities of American society. Joplin became one of America's most recognized composers of his generation. Yet recognition and opportunity did not always arrive together.
So good to see you again.
The music reached millions, but the people behind it often faced limits that audiences did not see. The story of ragtime was never only about success. It was also about who received credit, who was remembered, and who was left in the background. Because the next chapter of ragtime would not happen only in music halls. It would happen on the dance floor, where America would have to decide what it accepted and what it feared. Before ragtime filled America's ballrooms, another movement had already begun telling a complicated story through dance. The cakewalk emerged from African American communities during a period when freedom was new, but equality remained distant. Like many cultural traditions, it carried layers of memory, humor, and social meaning. Some historians interpret the cakewalk as a form of commentary, using performance to reflect on the world around them. One interpretation connects the dance to enslaved communities who used imitation and performance in complex ways under an unequal system. The exaggerated elegance of the movement has often been understood as a commentary on social manners and status. The body itself became a language. A dance could entertain, but it could also communicate ideas that words could not safely express. But once the cakewalk entered the commercial entertainment world, its meaning began to change. America's growing entertainment industry discovered that audiences wanted new and exciting performances. The dance that carried community meaning became part of a larger commercial spectacle. For some audiences, it was entertainment. For others, it was a simplified version of a much deeper tradition. This transformation raises a difficult question. What happens when a culture moves from its creators into the mainstream? Popularity can bring visibility, but it can also change the story being told. The journey of Cakewalk reveals both cultural influence and cultural tension, because traditions do not simply disappear when they enter popular culture. They continue carrying memories of where they came from. Cakewalk became one of the bridges connecting African American creativity with America's expanding entertainment industry. And this bridge would soon carry ragtime even further, into a national dance craze. The music had found its audience. Now the dance floor was ready. But when America began dancing faster, closer, and more freely, the reaction would become far more intense. By the early 1910s, ragtime was no longer only a musical style. It had become a movement people could see and feel. Across American cities, a new generation filled dance halls looking for something different. The rhythm was faster, the movements were freer, and the boundaries of traditional behavior began to shift. The turkey trot became one of the dances that defined this new era of movement. Its energy came from the same ragtime world that had transformed American popular music. To many young Americans, these dances represented excitement, modern life, and freedom. But not everyone saw the dance floor as a symbol of progress. Critics questioned whether these new dances reflected changing values or the decline of old traditions. Religious leaders and social reformers often became some of the strongest voices against modern dancing. In some places, authorities attempted to regulate where and how people could dance. The controversy was part of a larger transformation happening across America. Women especially became central figures in debates about modern behavior and independence. Small changes in social customs could represent much larger fears about changing roles. The debate was not simply about music. It was about who had the power to define acceptable culture.
Of course, I think you'll find the arrangement
For
delightful.
some, ragtime dances represented freedom. For others, they represented uncertainty. And beneath these debates existed a deeper American contradiction. A society divided by race and class was watching its popular culture become increasingly interconnected.
Here you go.
The people creating the rhythm were influencing the nation, even when the nation struggled to fully acknowledge them. The controversy around these dances revealed something deeper than changing entertainment. It revealed a country negotiating the meaning of freedom itself, because the story of ragtime was never only about who danced to the music. It was about who was allowed to own the story behind it. The music remained. The question was, who would be remembered behind it? Ragtime had become part of American life. But cultural influence and social recognition were not always the same thing. The musicians who shaped this sound created something that would outlive their own era. Their work required skill, discipline, and a deep understanding of musical tradition. Across America, families were bringing these sounds into their homes. The same music could exist in completely different social worlds. This was the America of the Jim Crow era, a country experiencing cultural exchange while maintaining racial separation. The boundaries of society remained powerful, even as music crossed them. For many African American artists, creativity existed alongside barriers they could not simply play away. The door to cultural influence was open. The door to equal opportunity often was not. The growing entertainment industry created new opportunities, but also new inequalities. Publishing and promotion shaped which artists became visible to the public. Behind every popular song was also a business system deciding how success was distributed.
The echoes of a
Evening, sister.
The history of
How is your
popular
mother
music
feeling
is not
today?
only a history of
She's much better,
sounds.
thank you for asking. The tonic seems to
It
be
is also a
working.
history of
They
people,
want us divided, but
opportunities,
we are here
and
to show
forgotten
them
stories.
the power of community strength.
Many creators
Remember that
influenced
our
American
voices
culture
unite us.
without receiving the same level of
Keep moving
recognition
now.
as their influence deserved.
Whoa, wonderful music.
Their names were sometimes overshadowed by the movement they helped create. But history has a way of returning to the voices it once overlooked, because cultural memory is not only about who became famous.
Come out tonight.
Me too.
It is about understanding the
This
communities
is
behind the
absolutely
creations.
Perfect.
Culture belongs to everyone who carries it forward, but its origins still matter. Ragtime changed America because it changed what people heard, felt, and imagined. Yet every step carried a history that was deeper than entertainment. The story of ragtime forces us to ask a difficult question. When culture crosses boundaries, do the creators cross with it?
Did you see that spin?
The answer would shape not only ragtime, but the future of American popular culture itself.
The time for action is now. We must rise
More
up
than a
and
century has
claim our
passed since
future.
ragtime entered America's dance halls. But the rhythm it introduced never truly disappeared. It evolved, transformed, and became part of the larger language of American music.
The Marx Brothers are on tonight.
The rhythmic ideas that shaped ragtime helped prepare the ground for new musical movements. American music became increasingly defined by syncopation, improvisation, and movement. The dance floors changed. The generations changed. But the connection between rhythm and movement remained. Music created by marginalized communities repeatedly became part of America's shared identity. Like the railroads that carried ragtime across the country, its influence traveled further than anyone could predict. The way Americans shared music changed dramatically over time. But the creative impulse behind the music remained the same, turning experience into expression. Every generation inherits rhythms created by those before them.
Everything is just so sleek and modern.
Ragtime became part of a larger story about how American culture is created. A sound once considered unusual became one of the foundations of modern popular culture. And perhaps the greatest legacy of ragtime is not only that America danced to it, it is that America was forced to confront where that rhythm came from. For many critics, the problem appeared to be simple. The dances were changing too much, too quickly.
You better work.
They worried about manners, morality, and the disappearance of familiar social rules. But beneath these arguments was a larger question. Who had the authority to define modern culture? The dance floor became a place where old boundaries were being tested. Music and movement were creating new forms of interaction in American cities. For some observers, the uncertainty was not only about dancing. It was about a changing America where old divisions were becoming harder to maintain.
Absolutely. I told him we should take the trolley down here.
Yeah.
I dare say the energy is infectious.
Ragtime exposed a contradiction at the heart of American life. A nation could embrace a sound while still struggling with the people and histories behind it. The real shock of ragtime was not simply that America danced differently. It was that America was dancing to a story it had not fully acknowledged. At the beginning of this story, we saw a room filled with people dancing to a sound that came from somewhere else. But behind every step was a history of creativity, struggle, and transformation. Ragtime became popular because America loved the rhythm. But understanding its meaning requires remembering the people who created it. The sounds that once existed at the margins became part of the nation's cultural foundation. The greatest legacy of ragtime is not only the music it created. It is the reminder that culture is always carrying stories, even when history forgets the people who first told them. Because sometimes, the most powerful revolutions do not begin with a protest. Sometimes, they begin with a rhythm.
Marvelous. Keep it up.
They're swell dancers, aren't they?
Hooray!
Look at them go!
Bravo. Keep going.
Isn't this splendid?